Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Taylor. I'm going to do a more official introduction in a minute or two, but we always like to give it a few minutes for people to make their way into the room. We know you're probably clicking in from another meeting, so it's a real privilege to have you with us today. Why don't, when you join, tell us where you're joining from. Roxana is way ahead of me, calling in from Helsingborg. Thank you, Roxana. You are not that far away. I'm based in Copenhagen, Germany, Malmo, Scotland. Ooh, London, Helsinki, Aarhus, Malmo. Wow, this is a lot. Thank you, everybody. Rome, Cambridge. I saw Scotland up there. I was just in a wedding in Inverness, and it was a beautiful, beautiful weekend. My Scottish, I can't pronounce some of those Scottish place names, but I try my best. I think this is probably us reaching critical mass. More people might come in over the next few minutes, but let's kick it off. As I said, my name is Taylor. I'm a product marketer here at Normative. Product marketing, it's essentially my job to really tell the story of what we do. I work with our product team, I work with our climate strategy team to really figure out how do we tell the story? How do we make it make sense? And I know what's top of mind for a lot of us right now is compliance and CSRD. And so that means part of my job then is figuring out people, our customers, people out there, businesses in Europe, businesses outside of Europe, they're all asking questions about CSRD. They're asking questions about E1 and carbon calculations. And so it becomes our job then to hopefully create content that's interesting and meaningful and will help you take the next step on your sustainability journey. I'm really, really thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar. As I said, we're going to zoom in on E1. E1, of course, is the climate change disclosure. You're going to hear way more about that from some of our great speakers. But with that, without further ado, I'm going to kick off. Some quick housekeeping as we go. We're going to aim for about a 45-minute duration for the webinar today. We'd really try and respect your time. The webinar will be recorded, so you'll get a recording of this after the fact. And please do submit questions. We're going to save 5-10 minutes at the end for questions. We know that this can be a very, very complicated subject matter, but we do have some professionals on the line today, so I'm hopeful we can answer as many questions as we can get to today. And if there's any that we can't get to, don't worry. This magical tool, Livestorm, does collect all of the questions, and we will get back to you. Either one of us or someone on our team will get back to you with those responses. And then last but not least, we do a post-webinar survey. We really try at Normative to create the kind of content that you're interested in. We want to make content that helps you, as I said, take the next step on your sustainability journey. So everything that we do, we're learning from you, learning what works, learning what doesn't work. So that should automatically pop up at the end of the webinar. Just take, I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes to give us some feedback, and that would be really, really helpful for us to produce better content for you. So today we have a great agenda. We're going to get a real world perspective first from a company called Ostel, based here in Denmark. Jesper will introduce himself in a few minutes, but he's going to tell you a bit about how they've handled their carbon calculation and the compliance work. Then we will transition to some speakers from Normative. We will have Smisir and Tristan, who are going to talk about what this looks like as a journey. We know that you're working with all sorts of raw business data. You have to turn that both into qualitative responses when it's your sustainability plan, but also a lot of quantitative responses when it's filling out some of the emissions information or the intensity metrics. And so we're going to try and cover as much as we can, recognizing the fact that this is a very complicated, very broad topic, even just E1. And so we're going to focus really on our specialty, which is around carbon, around climate change. And then, as I said, we will wrap up with a Q&A. So please do submit your questions. There is a little field in the bottom right of the Livestorm user experience. If you click down there on the questions, please do put your questions in there. That really helps us keep track. It helps us get to as many as we can. So as we go, I'll remind you, please put in your questions in the questions field, and that helps us get to as many as we can. So really quick about Normative. At Normative, our vision is to make known and reduce the sustainability impact of all the economic activities on the planet. And what that means in practice is that we invest a lot of time and energy on producing really, really excellent carbon calculations, because we know that when companies are able to see their carbon at a really granular level, whether that's looking at the emissions for a certain product line, a certain office, a certain region, that then puts them in a position to manage those emissions. Then they can report on their emissions through compliance legislation like CSRD. They can reduce it by designing emissions reduction initiatives. And eventually, we can all move forward to net zero. So I think this is the theme that you'll hear a lot more about over the course of the webinar today. And some really quick background just on us. We were founded in Stockholm in 2014. Sustainability is really core to everything that we do. We also work a lot with science. Scientific integrity is one of our core values. And we work with a lot of different climate groups. Being around since 2014, we've really been on the vanguard of this industry. And I think we have grown and developed as the industry has developed. So it's been really amazing for us to work with so many experts in the field to produce better and more actionable carbon emissions profiles. And I think from a people perspective, we come from a lot of different backgrounds, and that diversity, whether we're coming from big companies like SAP or really disruptive startups like Peakon, that diversity of experience is what helps us produce a really, really thoughtful product at the end of the day. And so now I'm really delighted to welcome Jesper. Jesper, please join us with your camera and tell us a bit about what you do. Tell us about you and then your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Taylor. So, very happy to be here. My name is Jesper. I work as a sustainability manager in Arsted, and I've been with Arsted for 2 years now. Just to give a little introduction to who is Arsted. It's a family-owned business based from Farum in Denmark, but with a global presence. We have a little manufacturing site in North America, and we have an office and both in the USA and in Turkey, but our main headquarters are in Denmark. And we then have sales and customers all over the world. We are making different solutions for the chocolate, for the bakery and the confectionery industries. So it's a business-to-business company. It's all the advanced equipment for tempering or enrobing the chocolate, depositing, molding, extruding, and so on. And we make everything from single equipment to full lines. And it's really high technology, so we have also a lot of patents and quite advanced and huge equipment on the shelf. Besides from that, it's a company that have very high ambitions on sustainability. Actually, sustainability is something that is really integrated in our business object and in our business strategy. We don't have a sustainability strategy as such, because we have simply said that the business strategy must include and integrate sustainability in it. So the figure you see here is actually not our sustainability strategy figure, but our business strategy figure. And you can see that sustainability is really in the core here, because we have said that in our why, that it's really about leading the transition towards a sustainable industry within our industry of chocolate, bakery and confectionery industries. We are guided by the triple Ps to have a triple bottom line view on things. We have really worked systematically to improve within the last decade on sustainability. We have reported on sustainability since 2018. And we have also, with a look on the CSRD, been working for a couple of years with the double materiality assessment. And looking at that, it shows that carbon emissions is actually one of our most significant sustainability issues, so very relevant for the topic today. We have reported on our scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions since 2018, and on scope 3 emissions since last year. As those of you who have engaged with scope 3 calculations will know, it's a bit more complicated than scope 1 and 2, but we finally got there last year. So a very nice achievement to have reached. So then, why is it important to do this kind of carbon accounting? Well, first of all, it enables us to set the targets for our improvement. We chose already 2 years ago to sign up for science-based targets. So we have set a reduction target on a net zero path towards 2030, based on science-based targets and based on our 2019 base year. And we have also committed to calculate and reduce our scope 3 emissions, but not yet with a target set in science-based targets. It enables us to set the targets because we know what's the basis. It also enables us to track improvement so that we can see from year to year, are we on the right track? Are we moving toward the net zero as we want to? And it also helps us to point at where we should focus our efforts, because it really highlights where is it that we have the big chunks of emissions that is worth focusing on. If you look at the figure here to the right, you can see that we have our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions in 3 different columns. And actually, you can only see one column, and that's because our scope 3 emissions is more than 99% of our total emissions. So it really points out that even though it may be a good idea to look at scope 1 and 2 and do something about that, where we really can make a difference as a company that is looking at the scope 3. And when we look at the scope 3, we can see also that, well, it is, we have the purchased goods and services, that is something like 4% of our total emissions, whereas the use of sold products is the 96%. And that is because we are making energy consuming equipment that is used for heating and cooling and processing the chocolate, and it's doing so for 24 hours a day, typically in the customers' manufacturing sites. It's done that for most of the year, and it's typically with a lifetime for at least 20 years. That's what we calculate based on. But we also know that a lot of the equipment is actually used for even longer time than that. So it really is a very valuable tool to see where is it that you should focus your efforts, where should you put your energy, because where is it that you can really make a difference. If we succeed to eliminate our scope 1 and 2, well, it's still just a little drop compared to the big C that we have in our scope 3 emissions. So, and if we could reduce our scope 3 emissions with just 10%, that would have an enormous effect. Aside from that, of course, the carbon accounting can also be used as documentation towards our customers. We have increasing demand from our customers to know about what's the carbon footprint of the products that they buy from us. So we need this kind of accounting to be able to give them that documentation. And of course, it's also mandatory for us from next year's accounting according to the CSRD. We are located in Europe. We are a company that is big enough to be in scope of CSRD. So from the year 25, we need to comply also by reporting on our carbon accounting. So there are many good reasons, but first of all, and that's why we got started even before it was mandatory, we see it as something that can really help us in targeting our efforts. So what have we learned so far? Well, we got a few surprises on dimensions. As you could see, it's really extreme that the scope 1 and 2 is so small, even when we look at the scope 3 categories, such as our business travels, that is actually the double level of our scope 1 and 2 together. So we learned a lot of where is it that we have our real footprint. And that is very useful learning when we are now looking at what we should do forward going. When you need to go into this kind of exercise, you need data and you need data quality, and you will not have that from a start. We don't have that from a start. We have supplier-specific data for some of our categories, for some of our inputs. That is very nice. So, for instance, for business travels, we can get quite good data from our suppliers on how much CO2 do we emit when we are traveling so much. But for a lot of the other activities, we don't have that kind of data. We have activity data for some. We know how many kilometers we transport certain things. We have weight data on some things, but there's also a lot of our data where we even don't have that and are needed to go on the spend-based route. So really recommendation here is you need to get started. So go with what you have for a start so that you can get started and then improve as you go. And then focus on the biggest contributions first, because it's not important to try to get very good data on something that only accounts for 0.2% of your total emissions, but maybe very important to focus on that would account for 10 or even 50% of your contributions. So focus on the biggest contributions first, get that in order, and then you can refine it over the years. That's the approach that we have chosen in Arsted. When we look at our next steps, we now have our first baseline for the scope 3 based on last year, and we are now in the process of setting our scope 3 targets. Because it is so different, we have chosen that we will most probably set 2 targets for our scope 3, one for the upstream part and one for the downstream part, because it's very different means that you need to go with to achieve reductions. And we are also a little afraid that if we only set 1 target, then the upstream part will kind of drown in the size of the downstream part. So we will set 2 specific targets for upstream and downstream, and hope to be in place with that within the next month or 2. Then we have started also the journey to improve from top on data quality. to see where is it that we can do that, who are, when we look at the supplier side, the biggest contributors, suppliers, because then we can see those are the suppliers that we need to engage with first to get some supplier-specific data from them. And then we can go from there. And then, of course, use the data for prioritization of reduction activities. For instance, when we are looking at our R&D efforts, we can use them to improve on the product design so that we reduce the input side, the upstream part. But we can also use the same R&D efforts on improving, for instance, the energy efficiency, which could reduce the downstream part. And since this is like 90 times bigger than the upstream part, maybe it's better to use our efforts in R&D on that part, on the energy efficiency, rather than on the material side. So this is the kind of guidance that you can get out of doing carbon accounting. We have been very happy until now for our cooperation with Normative on this. It's a very good platform to get your data processed in, and you really have the ability to go with the different data quality levels and to improve as you go. So we are quite satisfied so far, and are really looking forward to our next steps. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesper. I know we're all a little hungry after lunch hearing about chocolate. I am embarrassed to think of how many jokes you get about chocolate, but I had to make one quick one. Thank you again. We will transition now to my normative colleague, Smisir, who's going to talk a bit about E1 starting from the very beginning. And don't forget, please do put your questions in the question and answer field in the bottom right. Smisir, without further ado.
Thank you, Taylor. My name is Smisir Vaskovic, and I'm a senior climate strategy advisor here at Normative. And together with my colleague, Tristan, who is the product manager at Normative, we will walk you through some insights and, some insights on ESRS, and in particular on E1 climate change. Normative's core expertise is in carbon accounting, and it's not surprising we focus on this standard on E1 today. Due to time constraints, we won't be able to cover all the details in the standard, but we need to perhaps have 10 webinars on the topic. But I will try to share at least some valuable insights with you. So this is what a standard CSRD journey looks like. Today, we will touch upon bits of the second half of the journey, namely data collection and reporting. And the topics we cover today will still be relevant to you, even if you have not started your journey yet. If you wish to learn more about the earlier steps and double materiality in particular, please join our next webinar, and we will explore this topic in depth. All right, so here is an overview of the ESRS standards. As you know, ESRS 2 is mandatory for everyone, and the topical standards are all subject to double materiality assessment. A company can omit all disclosure requirements in a topical standard if it assesses that the topic is not material. And this is true for all topical standards. So everything you see on the screen, environmental, social, and governance, right? So it's true that you can omit all the disclosure requirements if you don't find the topic to be material. However, for E1 climate change, and that's why it's highlighted on these slides, you will need to provide a detailed explanation of your materiality assessment. and explain why you find climate change to be not material, and also share some details or some details of your analysis in case the climate change will become material in the future. There is one important point, however, as you can see in the standards, if you check the official document of the standards, there are certain disclosures from ESRS 2 that are explicitly mentioned in the topical standards. And they are to be reported even if you don't find a topical standard to be material. And what I mean by that is ESRS 2 is always mandatory and shall be reported. Another point I wanted to address here is auxiliary verbs. And I know that this webinar suddenly becomes a grammar lesson, but it's quite important to emphasize, so please bear with me. When it comes to ESRS, auxiliary verbs really matter. In ESRS, you have may, which indicates that this disclosure is voluntary. You also have shall, which indicates that disclosure is mandatory. And you also have shall consider, which is not a recommendation, it's actually a requirement. So it's something that you are expected to do. And I think it also can be, well, a little bit of a cultural perception, because some things, they sound like suggestions, but they are actually not. They are requirements. So please pay attention to the auxiliary verbs in the standards. Okay, now let's look into E1 climate change. So this is the list of all the disclosure requirements. And there are 9 in total. Here comes the second half of the English language lesson. So you need to pay attention to nouns and their definitions, because you have policies, actions, you have plans, you have targets. So first 4 disclosure requirements. And all of these have very clear definition. You also have metrics, which are energy, for instance, or emissions, number 5 and number 6. The definitions for this, for policies, actions, plans, targets, metrics, they are not available in the main body of text. If you wish to check them, they are all in Annex 2. And it's not the most exciting read, but keep it near, as it might get handy at some point. And of course, you might ask yourselves, but why does it even matter? The auxiliary verbs, the nouns and definitions, and it matters a lot because the rules for policies, actions, and targets, and they're collectively called PATs, they're different for metrics. So if you do not have PATs in place, you shall say it. So you can say, no, we don't have them. And then you may report the time frame when you plan to have them in place, right? So that's the rule that exists in ESRS. And it's different for metrics because the materiality of disclosure requirements matters. And if a disclosure requirement is not material, you do not need to disclose it or the associated data points. If a disclosure requirement material, you shall disclose it. And if you do not have the actual data for metrics, you shall estimate it. So you can't just say, oh, well, we don't have metrics in place. It does not work the same way as for PATs, right? So this is really important to understand this difference. And it is stipulated in ESRS 1, paragraphs 33, 34. And it's also visualized in an absolutely fantastic flowchart also in ESRS 1 in Appendix E. So you can double check that after the webinar. All right, moving on. As I mentioned, normative is primarily carbon accounting software, and that's why I will touch upon the areas where we have direct support in our system. And we are working on a software feature that will enable companies to gather all the data points in one place, so consolidate all the data points in one place. But today we will show you only some parts that will help you in the development of your transition plan, and it will come later during Tristan's presentation. And right now I would like to focus on 3 disclosure requirements from E1 climate change, the ones that are highlighted on the screen. The list is not exhaustive, so please consult the respective standards if you want to see a complete overview. So here we have E1.4. You need to disclose your reduction target that you've set. You see, that's why the definitions matter, because if you do not have a reduction target, you have to say that and then provide more information on your when you aim to have it in place. So here you need to disclose the target that you have set. And the targets should be in absolute value. They shall cover all 3 scopes, either combined or separately. You have to specify the method, whether it's market-based method or location-based method, and also which greenhouse gases were covered and your total emissions covered by the target, plus base year and the target year. In my experience, many companies are terrified about updating or restating their reduction targets, especially the ones that formally got their targets validated by SBTi, for example. But the updates in the targets is something that is expected, right? In ESRS, it's stated that a company shall update its base year from 2030 and every 5-year period thereafter. So it will be much more common to do that, to update and restate the targets. The last one I wanted to mention here is the decarbonization levers, which are, well, types of mitigation actions like energy efficiency, use of renewables, supply chain decarbonization. So it's something you also need to have. Then under E1.5, a company needs to disclose the data points related to the energy consumption and mix. So you shall report your total energy consumption in megawatt hours and then disaggregate it. You have to disaggregate your consumption into 3 buckets: fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and renewable energy. And additionally, you have to disclose your non-renewable and renewable energy production. So you have to disclose your consumption and production. And if you, let's say, have solar panels installed on the roof, that will be reflected in your renewable energy production. For E1.6, a company shall consider, so it's not a recommendation, it's a requirement, shall consider Greenhouse Gas Protocol Corporate Standard, Scope 2 Guidance, and Scope 3 Standard. If you are a financial institution, you also have to follow PCAF. So it's another standard for financial institutions. You should disclose your emissions in CO2 equivalents. So you need to calculate the emissions from multiple greenhouse gases. You also shall disclose your emissions per each scope, and then calculate scope 2 using both market and location-based methods. And it was a requirement even before CSRD, but it's just not all the companies did that. Additionally, if you use biofuels in your operations, or if you purchase fossil fuels that contain some biofuels, you will have biogenic emissions. And it's much more common than you think. Believe me, it's very common to have some biofuels in the fuel you purchase. CO2 biogenic emissions will be reported outside of scopes. And I need to emphasize that we are talking about carbon dioxide biogenic emissions, because there are also other biogenic emissions from methane, for example, or nitrous oxide, and it will be included within the scopes. So it's important to remember that. And lastly, you shall present the emissions, so your emissions data, in a very specific format. You can see the format under AR48, so it's application requirement 48 in the E1 climate change. All the previous disclosure requirements I talked about, targets and energy consumption, they also have formats, but those formats are optional to use. This one for emissions is mandatory. That's why, again, pay attention to the auxiliary verbs and the standards, because it does matter and affects your reporting. Well, this is the last detail I wanted to touch upon today. I will pass the torch to my colleague Tristan, who will tell and show you how you can move from theory to practice and build your transition plan.
Great, thank you so much, Zmitse. Good afternoon, everybody. Now that Zmitse has gone into the nitty-gritty semantics of ESRS, I'm going to pull back a bit and take a bit of a higher-level view and share how our customers are approaching that all-important E11 disclosure transition plan for climate change. So as mentioned, my name is Tristan. I'm a product manager in the reduction team here at Normative. And the reduction team is the team building the tools that help our customers reduce emissions, obviously, and begin building their transition plans for climate change. As it stands today, we're primarily focused on the quantitative stuff, so 1.5 degree aligned targets, decarbonization levers, scenarios, to some extent cost. And I'll give you a tour of this in a moment. But before we jump into Normative, I want to offer up some of the learnings that we have gathered from speaking to and working with our customers throughout this journey. And it's basically the fact that our customers are using these disclosures as stepping stones, starting from what they know and working upwards towards what they're still trying to nail down. So most of you today will likely have measured your emissions already, which means that you're probably fairly confident with E15 and E16. And the natural next step would be to set targets and move upwards towards E14. And a fair number of our customers, many of the organizations that we have spoken to, are still in that target setting phase. And it seems that there's a healthy sense of caution when it comes to setting and publicly committing to targets. We saw across the market in the late 2010s a flurry of very ambitious targets being set and commitments to being climate neutral being made that ultimately left a lot of organizations scratching their heads as to how they were going to achieve them, or in the worst cases, needing to walk back some climate neutral or carbon neutral statements. So the current caution is not necessarily a bad thing, but we do have to overcome it somehow. So that's where we start to see the interplay between E13 and E14. So what our customers are doing is effectively they are mapping out their available decarbonization levers and building an understanding of the costs associated with reduction, such that they feel confident to commit to targets. And once you've got these two sets of information in place, the level of ambition and the timelines laid out in your targets, and the how-to plans detailed in your decarbonization levers, you're empowered to begin crafting policies for climate change mitigation, and eventually filling in the blanks in that transition plan, as it's really crucial to have these things nailed down first before you start adding in some of the other context in E11 as to how you're going to finance things, whether the strategy is approved by your board, for example. So let's hop into Normative and see how our customers are doing this today. Cool. Okay, so first we have our comparisons feature. And I've already set up a few comparisons, but we're going to finish one off live today. I'm going to focus on business travel throughout the tour, mostly because everyone just gets business travel. But I should say that we have more than 30,000 emission factors, and the Comparison Explorer is built on our calculation engine. So you can access the full range of our emission factor taxonomy. And actually, I can show you some. So you could, for example, compare the emission impact of primary PET material production or secondary PET, so like closed loop recycled PET, sort of plastic bottles. And here we see that secondary material is about 22% lower in emissions per ton of material, and slightly more expensive as per March. This is when these numbers came in. So this is the cost associated with 1 ton of PET. We also have the example of nearshoring software consultancy. So this is an example of spending money on computer consultancy services in Sweden versus Estonia, which is a common nearshoring software base for companies based in Sweden. But for our example, I'm going to hop back to our trains versus planes. So I chose to mock up a comparison for a trip between Heathrow and Schiphol, because I found out recently that there are around 15 flights a day between these two airports, flown by KLM and British Airways, which I thought was pretty crazy because one, doesn't include the budget airlines, and two, it's only 360 kilometers by train. So it's not that difficult to take. So we can see already that the emission impact of the train trip is 97% lower than the plane trip, but I can also add cost. So with this, I can either add the total cost or I can add the cost per unit. Now the total cost is relevant in this case because I know the total cost of my flight, which would be 130, but you might want to add cost per unit in situations where you know the cost per kilogram or the cost per ton or the cost per liter of a specific activity that you're going to do. And add cost. And I also know the price of my train trip, which I checked just before this, was 111 euros for the 2nd of September if you take the train at 6 o'clock in the morning. So in this case, not only does the train have lower emissions, it also costs less than the average flight. I can save this comparison, and I can also share it with my stakeholders internally. And the idea of being able to save the comparisons is these comparisons represent decarbonization levers. So this is what you're putting into E13. And so you can come back to this, you can build an understanding of what the cost is when it comes to emission reduction. But what else can you do? So I'm going to hop into our scenarios feature. And this is how do you see that well? We'll live with it. I'm going to hop into a scenarios feature. So this is a prototype of something that's coming very soon. And I'm going to go back to an initiative I was creating earlier. So I have business class long haul flights. I have short haul flights. I have national rail and I have international rail. So this is a business travel or a flight emission reduction initiative that I can create in Normative. So I'm going to add these to my initiative. And I see here I have a name, reduce air travel emissions. I have a description, and we recommend to our customers that they keep the names and descriptions nice and tidy, because these are also representations of decarbonization levers that can be used in E13 and ultimately E14 and E11. So that's transition plan, E11, E13 is decarbonization actions, and then E14 is targets. And here I have my scenario emissions, 1,200 tons. And I have my initiative, which covers around 200 of those tons. And I can begin reducing certain categories. So I'm going to reduce my long haul business travel. I'm going to reduce my short haul business flights, and I'm going to increase my rail transport. So we see that I have a net reduction in emissions, despite the fact that I'm increasing my train trips and reducing my air travel. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And here I see the reduction initiative running between 2024 and 2030, contributes a 5% reduction to my overall inventory, my overall footprint, but it doesn't get me all the way to my target, right? I'm still quite a way off in that target that I've set. So our customers are using this to build their plans for emission reduction. And once there's a plan, they can begin thinking about how to get approval for it, critical for transition plan for E1, financing it, also critical for both E3 and E1, and figuring out how to embed this sort of long-term reduction trajectory into their overall business strategy, which is also expected in the E1.1 disclosure. Cool, that's it for me. Back to you, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Tristan. It is super energizing both to hear from product experts as well as people like Jesper out in the field who are actually making all of this happen. I am so sorry that we did run out of time for question and answer this afternoon. If you have a question, we will definitely stay on the line another minute to help. You can submit. We've tried to respond in writing to as many as we can, but any additional questions, we will absolutely follow up after this. So if you have a question, submit, we will get back to you. But once again, it's my job to thank you for attending. Thank you so much, Smisir, Tristan, and Jesper for being our wonderful speakers. It is exciting to hear what everyone is working on. As I said at the beginning of the session, this industry is developing as we go, and it's a time where we're all learning, we're all trying to figure out how to get this data better and better every day so that we can reduce and move to net zero. So if you want to book and time to talk to anyone at Normative, please reach out. We put a little CTA on the screen, should be clickable, or reach out to any of us. With that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again for the questions. We will get back to you with answers. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, speakers. Thanks, attendees. Thank you for being active. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye, Jesper.